So, few words of introduction, though we start with some. My background is in physics, but without a but. I'm teaching for the last 5 years in a master course of integrated design. And so, while interacting from the standpoint.
Yes, sorry.
It just started. So I was saying I come from a background of physics. I'm teaching for the last 5 years in a master course in design. Integrated design deals mostly with systems. And what I build and teach is about concepts from complexity and from adaptive systems being introduced to design. What I'm going to open today is actually in direct relation with the concept of Stigmergy, which I came in contact with for the first time from the literature of Heidegger. And since then, I began to introduce it within the environment of design practice. And I think that there are some very interesting aspects that are addressing on top of how the science look at it. So, first of all, to mark the coordinates, there is a significant difference in the mindset between science and design. This is, I'm taking from Christopher Alexander. He's a very famous architect. What he is writing, scientists investigate the nature of reality and are mostly observers as to the issue of creation. While architects and designers must be and are active proponents, which mean they are constantly producing, not in terms of object and materials and environment, and the work affects billions of people and covers huge volume of physical stuff. This not to make a distinction, but I think it's very important that to understand that most of the material environment in which we exist is an outcome of design, and there is as if a separation between the two causal loops. So, comparing the ideal typical models of engaging in research, scientific inquiry, describing and explaining the bio and the physical and the social, it's theoretical, the explanations are true until falsified, and the output is theory and evidence and physics, chemistry, biology, the list is very long. Of course, this is very rough, but it's just to make, of course, it's very rough. I know it by the fact that I find myself in both. While design deals with building, with engaging directly with the locality of the world, and the goal can be said most of the times, the building of something new. It is applied, and the purpose is to produce something which is effective, and the evidence is on the effectiveness of the artifacts. And we find there design, architecture, engineering, information systems, medicine, all the non-exact science. When we write something new, it's already very clear that we are not doing exactly problem solving, though usually design is discussed as problem solving, because something new, it's not a well-defined problem. Usually it's actually a wicked problem, which means there is no knowledge about the territory, there is not enough data, there are no experts, so it's more about engaging with the local aspects and contextual aspects than direct problem solving. What I find interesting, specifically by having the opportunity of being here in such an interesting and big project like the Global Brain, is that looking at the correlation between the two, clearly the science is setting the paradigms, the theories, and within this kind of frameworks, theories, paradigms, the construction and the evaluation of the artifacts and design happens. And we have here, it's all the scientific method in terms of discovering theory and validating and predicting and experimenting. And here it's the building, the artifact goes out in the world and it has to be evaluated in terms of effectiveness. What I think becomes more and more interesting is the second side of the loop, which actually says that all of these events, apart from the fact that they provide value and utility in life at large, but they provide some very interesting phenomenological cases, which mean they put phenomena in context and they can inform very seriously science when it's on the verge of emerging theories. It's not within an established framework, but it's like it's part of the fringe happening that can be used as a phenomenological set of cases. Disciplinary, this is mostly transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. It can never happen in one discipline. A designer, doesn't matter what is the preparation, usually has to, first of all, integrate information. A scientist even more, but it's a different type of gaps between them. So the kind of interesting projection is, if so, how to look at this overcoming of the limits of cognition. Of course, the investigation of the nature of reality, which is one of the possible descriptions of science. A different description, which is less strong, it's providing a sophisticated methodology that yield predictive powers. And what I am talking about, it's the continuous production of our physical environment and reproposing social relation, which is something that we continuously do, mediating them through new artifacts. And if this can be discussed, accepted as part of extending cognition, then how is it possible to integrate these multiple aspects of it?
But here you are mixing science and design.
Yes. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you suggesting that in order to overcome the limits of cognition, there is a need to move from...
At the moment,
there is a need to move a more process-oriented approach of reality?
Process?
Yes, to put and not limit on cognition, but seeing cognition as a way of unfolding.
What I'm saying here is that, in a way, the human, in its big endeavors, it's always about extending the limits of cognition. It does it through science, it does it through technology, it does it through the fact that it produces its own environment. The environment is not given. As of today, it's enough to look at this class. There is absolutely nothing in this class which was not designed. Which means we are producing the environment. And if we agree to the fact that the environment has some kind of cognitive influence and value, then the production of the environment is part of how we extend, of how we stretch the limitation. Okay, so this, and I am bringing the possibility of where are the meeting points, if at all, if they can be integrated, if it's interesting, if they can provide a phenomenological line. So yes, when we speak about extending cognition, it's about manipulating abstract symbol, it's about manipulating perception, and it's about manipulating the material environment. And within this, I wish to emphasize the mediums through which we interact between us and with the environment. There is a lot of research or discussion on offloading cognitive load to the environment and to have artifacts that support complex symbolic manipulation. One of them. Extending perception. Well, the interesting part is that all of this may allow instances of self-organization that are not a priori delimited by the contour of the individual. Which means we produce our environment and we allow something to happen which self-organize without an a priori set contour. So this is extended cognition, embodied cognition. So, as I said before, the human environment is totally human-made, totally designed. For all practical purposes, it's a new nature. It's this idea of nature, it's a bit, for good and for bad, we kind of left it behind. And what is interesting is that as a new nature, it evolves. So here it's written in terms of the evolution of shaving, which means it's the action of the human, but it carries a very clear evolution of the tools, which even if we look now, forgive me for the bluntness, but if we look at the last 25, 30 years, we see that something which was a stick with 2 blades got all the way to be 5 blades rotating, vibrating, doing all kinds of things. It's an evolution. So the kind of interaction with the environment can be described as the interplay between a continuously evolving state of nature, where I would replace it with state of human-made environments, and a continuously changing state of mind. Like in the case of shaving, the tool allows myself to re-describe myself, and then the next tool emerges, and it's a kind of continuous loop. Social environments, here I'm meaning the immediate social and physical setting in which individuals communicate, coordinate, organize. I think that we are going through something extremely exciting on how this environment are developing in the last half a century. So we have all the physical, but we have the digital, we have the virtual, we have virtual and physical augmented. I saw a few weeks ago that they launched some Valentine competition or party in which the couples goes out and one is wearing virtual glasses and augmented reality, and the other one is carrying him or her along the city, and the whole idea is this combination of the human interface and the virtual augmented one. So it's fully interwoven with artifacts of all kinds, technological and otherwise. This is a remark. In the last 20 years, which this I find very interesting, it's like design used to be something ultimately specific. It was about adapting the requirement of an object to the industrial production. Point. This is from where it started. And in less than 40, 50 years, it became an approach which as of today operates on all kinds of fringe events, which are mostly the events where we don't have accessible theory, which are scientific and applicable very easily. So they enter, for example, with design thinking in business organization, all kinds of businesses that don't know how to solve themselves, social innovation. This, for example, it's a very good, there is a lot of problems with the inability to assist all blind people. And this designer put up this, it's an application, a simple application that if I am blind and I am in a super and I want to read the ingredients of something, I push the application, I show it, and someone on the other side write me or tell me what are the ingredients. So it's a kind of hello, sorry. And this again, I'm not clearly validating, but my sense is that the less we know, which means the more we are on the verge of a new kind of paradigm, and the more we design. It's like we don't go in with the full framework, we design. Just to give a few images that makes it very clear, the planning of a city, which is infinitely complex, and we are building in the last couple of years one a month, one a week. It's designing common spaces, engineering tools for collective coordination, fine-tuning of cognitive system. It's very difficult to say where the line between science on one side and art and aesthetic sensitivity and design on the other. I think it's really not that straightforward. And we are confronting the need to generate it faster and faster and to have it adaptable and to deal with a variety of areas of human endeavor that we didn't have before. They were not... and when this is the case, then there is also the question of, okay, so what are we evaluating? Because in science it's very clear, we are evaluating the validity of a theory. In design, as if it is very clear, we are evaluating the effectiveness of an artifact. But when we enter these kind of territories, which are the interesting kind of territories, so how do we evaluate? I don't have an answer. But I wish to bring up two aspects. One, that it's relevant because at the moment what happens is that all these systems, which are emergent because it's the artifacts and the users and the dynamics, are running on real-time crash tests. They go on the market, they are being used, they enter our cognitive spaces, social spaces, they do what they do, and we know very little about it. So their effect is not regulated by nothing else than market forces, national policy, maybe somewhere. And the second one, that the moment we go out from strong, pure science that propose a very objective, detached, universal kind of perspective, we find we absolutely need to deal with value. And this, it's a very difficult question, because in a way, design until 10, 15 years ago solved it by saying it's the genius of the designer, it's the genius of the architect. It means it put it completely on the individual. And today, this is absolutely not possible. This is not the case. So this is a very serious question. How do we discuss between the subjective, the collective, the aesthetic, the functional? And we've seen quite some disasters around. Within all of this, the concept of Stigmergy, I believe, provides quite some ground for description on one side and for work on the other. I will go through it very quickly, I assume. I don't. Initially, it's from animal sociology. It comes to solve the coordination paradox. In its most general definition, it speaks about indirect communication and coordination mediated by the environment. This is without any kind of... it has been described in terms of a stigmergic feedback loop, where the action one agent is leaving a trace in the environment, and the trace is enticing, stimulating, or making more probable a subsequent agent by the same, subsequent trace action by the same agent or a different agent. Which means once it is ignited, it is a very strong engine for production, differentiation, design. This is exactly what I told now, which is from the...
Okay.
Yes. I am not on this, I'm just saying not to jump directly into it. So there is the agent, the medium, which can be... I will explain it a bit more in detail in the coming. And as I said before, the fact that this feedback loop is clearly articulated, that it was clearly articulated, makes it very accessible for design. Both for the creative process and for the thinking about design, for the description of design. Since then, it has been extended to quite a number of territories. It went into artificial life, robots, computer-supported human collaboration, coordination, and lately human cognition. The main aspects, and this is part of the feedback, so there is a medium. The medium is being perceived by all the agents. So let's say that you have, I will go to the example that began, that originate the concept. It's a colony of social insects. The social insect seems to work independently, but the global order that emerged, a nest, a distribution of labor, a search for food, it's extremely coordinated. So the coordination paradox is between an agent that doesn't have the big picture and clearly doesn't have a very directed way to operate, and a kind of organization that order that emerge on the global level.
Can I ask a question? I have done, my PhD, I've done Stigmergy work and also linked it into my previous work on urban systems. But what I'm not seeing the link here is that in a framework of Stigmergy, you have an agent that through evolution has specialized. It means that it secretes some specific trace that the other agents can communicate, like in social colony.
In social insects, but we are...
So when you say that it seems that they don't have a rich picture of the whole whole yet doesn't exist. So through that specification, they can coordinate their act. But when you apply it to, for instance, prototype of a design, unless you have specifically designed it for interaction of certain section of the social system, of the complex system, then you cannot define it for Stigmergic systems.
The whole idea is to try and design mediums. In this case, they are environments, artifacts, interactive spaces, to design them to allow some kind of Stigmergic event. This is the idea. It's not to, I am not using at the moment to explain, because I think there is plenty of literature on this. I am trying to bring it into something that provides grounds for making it happen, to use it. Okay, to use it, what I called before, the continuous production and generation of the environment, to be aware that this is what we are introducing in the environment. Which means potentially it's a cognitive feedback loop that has a big influence. It has a big impact. And it's totally unaware within the design world, and it's not being communicated between the scientific and the design. Okay, so self-organized collective coordination, it can be applied to Stigmergy, but this applies also when you don't have a physical kind of medium, though lately Stigmergy was expanded beyond. So the individual are acquiring and spreading information locally. You can think of a bird in a flock. He is reading his neighbors and he is spreading his impact on the neighbors. an individual responds by behavior to the local information, and patterns emerge at the global level, which here there is the mystical gap. Because they are temporal and spatial structures that exceed enormously the scale of an individual. And Stigmergy provides a mechanism for both the transfer of information, of how this information is transferred from the local to the global, and for the processing of information, which this would be the offloading into the environment. Because the moment the medium can perform aggregation, summation, diffusion, differentiation, it's all happening in the medium, which means that it's not part of the cognitive
I try to separate the medium from the activities, in the sense that the medium is just passive. But what you say, I mean, all that happens in the medium, but I try to functionally separate. There are activities going on the medium. Those activities don't need to be performed by agents. They could be performed by physical processes.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, the processing of
Yes,
information might just be physical processing happening on the medium.
Yes. This is the intention. They are physical processes, like the ground being placed one on top of the other and remaining there and becoming the memory of what is the current state of affairs. Okay, feedback loops, fluctuations, interactions. The interactions can be sequential, they can be parallel. What is important, this is a very good example for this in the collective organization. If there is someone in the middle of the street and he is looking up, and you have people walking by, the probability that some of them will stop will go up. The moment they are 2 or 3 or 4, the probability will go even more. But beyond a certain period of time, those that look up and don't see anything, because they are fluctuating again, they will keep on going. If you wouldn't have this random kind of fluctuation, they would neither stop nor go. It would be locked on one of the two. So you need some kind of interaction with the agents that it's imperfect, that contains the error, because this is part of the computation. And all of this I'm saying because then it translates into what are the elements that I'm extracting for design, for the possibility of design. So when we go to do research, we are researching the behavior between what is the spontaneous behavior of an agent and what is the behavioral response to a local information. Researching the medium, which means the medium to understand it first of all, and then it can be augmented, like you can see things that before were not accessible, and one can design לגמרי a new medium completely. And then the coordination that emerge, it's not predictable, but you know that something might emerge which is interesting. And the perception mechanism, which means the sensory organs can be either augmented or stimulated, or new sensory organs can be added. This is something that it's very much part of design today, how to produce some kind of perception that it's not otherwise accessible. For example, going around with the magnets and being able to feel the Wi-Fi or the electric current, or an even much simpler example, we all have the sixth sense of GPS, which I find fantastic, because by now everything that we see in terms of where we are going, we see it from upstairs. Because we got used to look at the maps, we got used to work with the GPS, so we suddenly have a new sense that we didn't have before, and it's totally integrated. We don't have to do any kind of transformation anymore. And it took not so long. It's about 20 years. Okay, so here I played with it. because I need also to make it understood for designers. So what I did here, there are the first two kinds of mechanisms that were defined. One, it's about differentiating between quantitative kind of Stigmergy and qualitative kind of Stigmergy, which now I'm going to show it with examples. And the other one, which is to distinguish between something that it's being read as the current state of a solution, like the nest, and something that it's marker-based, like the streets with the pheromone. Okay? So the classic examples, what did I do? The classic example here, quantitative, it's the nest building with the current of the current state of the solution. So the more mud is being placed, the more pheromone.
Is that what is also called sematectonic?
Exactly. Yes, it simply sounds such a terrible word. I don't know why they don't change it. Sematectonic. It's like only this.
People also created that word.
On this side, which is also quantitative, but it's marker-based, you have the traits, which mean that when ants are going out to forage, they go out pretty much at random. Let's assume, it's an assumption. They go out pretty much at random. The first one that finds food come back and leaves a trace on the way back. This one will come back from a shorter road, and this is coming back from a longer one. The one that comes from the shorter will immediately send someone back. So this one is being reinforced, and this one will slowly dissipate. And what we get, it's actually through the medium an optimization of path, which is very, it has been used a lot in all computers routing. The qualitative, which speaks about the fact that when the trace is being read in the medium, different traces produce qualitatively different actions. So, for example, if the wasp read the beginning of the small tube that she is building, she will finish it, and when it gets to the end, it will begin next to it. But if someone is going to ruin or to modify, she will restart everything from scratch. And then we have, for example, slime molds, which I think are an interesting case, because they begin as quantitative, which means in the beginning the cells are moving according to a gradient of a particular chemical that they are emitting in stress. But beyond the threshold, they become qualitative, which means beyond the particular threshold, they become a one organism and move like a sort of a slug or fruit. And I think that this, by the way, it's something that it's very much found in biochemical organism, to have something that is between the quantitative and the qualitative with the threshold. Morphogenesis.
It's a phase transition. Actually.
It's a phase transition, exactly. Here we can put, for example, ranking, which means whenever we like something, we put a like, or don't like now, we can put us. And this is kind of a marker, and it aggregates automatically in the medium, and it brings something up. So there is some kind of processing of information that happens by an action that is ultimately local, but the outcome is global, because when you open the page, you find on top the one with more marked. Signing a petition, if you see that there is a lot of signatures, so there is some kind of reading, because after all I'm interested a lot in the human kind of cases. Wiki edits, of course. The edits are calling for different kind of edits, so it's qualitative in this sense. Not every edits call for the same. And the comments, which are kind of marker-based. So this is all very well, you know it better than anybody. Post-it notes also can be read as a kind of a marker. Human settlements, interestingly, belong to this qualitative and current state of the solution, and I will show something at the end where the urban plan, it's a semi-nomadic community, and they have a very precise way to arrange themselves according to how the houses are placed before them. So there is a kind of qualitative response to the space distribution of previous human settlements. Very quickly, traces that are left in the medium, they can be transient, persistent, intentional, and unintentional, automated within the... This, I think, it's an interesting case because actually it brings up all the discussion about privacy. It's very much in this graph because we are moving from something, let's say, organic memory that is transient to something that becomes, in a fashion which is not necessarily very aware, more and more persistent. And it's not only persistent, لمثال, from digital data, digital reputation, medical records, I actually get another space, another Stigmergy space that operates on this first operation, so I don't even know how to define it. But there is here actually a new Stigmergy operation where the agents are algorithms. So I do have suddenly a differentiation and decision making that it's being done on the basis of automated traces. And I think it could be very interesting to go there, to try to go there with Stigmergy to understand what are the lines and if there is something that can be described. And footprints, like on the beach, if you walk on the beach, in terms of unintentional, it's like you don't walk in order to leave traces. It's not like doing the like, but you leave traces behind. It means the medium, it's automatically taking traces from your action. And this was kind of, it's like we all leave DNA traces around, but until not long ago, it didn't absolutely make any sense. It was not a trace. It was a waste. But today, with the fact that we can read DNA traces, suddenly it's a trace. Something that was a waste or it was a non-informative becomes a trace. Okay, so from here, what I'm going to do is to show 4 projects. They are a beginning. I'm not 4 projects that worked on the concept of Stigmergy as design. So the first one was a visualization. It's called Trace. From Daphne Levin, which was about trying to use design to create a tool to study mass collaboration in a fashion which is not deadly. So to use visualization to interface with the data and to see if we can extract possible insights in designing for collaborative digital environments and to extract design patterns that support Stigmergic collaboration between humans. What was the decisions were mostly to show the evolution in time of the Stigmergic medium. It uses a wiki, specifically a Wikipedia, but it works with all wikis. And the idea is to move it from something that is just the current state of the solution, which means the page of the Wikipedia, to show in a fashion which is accessible as much as possible the history of the edits, which is actually the evolution in time of the Stigmergic mechanism. Here I'm not showing it because I had some technical problem, but in principle the kind of image that is being produced, it's interactive in the fact that I can explore through the image every single data in it. I can zoom in as much as I want, I can click on the comment, I can see who is the author. Here I'm just giving, because if not it becomes a bit too much, I'm just giving the shot, like to see what it allows to see. And what is important is that there are many visualizations on Wikipedia, to say the least, of articles, but usually it's a long one. The time goes linearly. And what we were very interested was to create a one glance that remains a once glance visual. So the circle is being used to represent the data. So for example, this is an article about a senator that had a scandal. It doesn't matter. But you can see that from 2004, the article is starting. The length of the segment gives the page length. The yellow with the size of it gives each time the text added, the white the text deleted, and the circle gives the timeline, which is equally distributed until the last available date. So it keeps on pushing it in the circle. This is what I said before. The data is intrinsic, which means when I have this interactive, I can take the mouse and go deep in, and I get the comments on this picture. What are the patterns that we managed to see here? It's not universal breakthroughs, but first one, when it is being represented like this, the white means that there is a lot of interaction. So wherever there is this kind of stripes, it means that the editing is very, very active. And then one can go and check if there is a correlation between the significant events and what happens in the world. So in this case, it was Defense of Marriage Act, and there was the DOMA, the Supreme Court, and exactly in conjoined with this time, one see the race of so suddenly, this type of patterns allows me to correlate between what happens within this kind of media and what happens in interaction with the world.
Why did you choose a circular representation of time? Isn't it more logical to have a linear representation of time?
Because the linear representation of time, it's like it's very difficult to read in one go. I need to stretch it, to go with it. While this allows me a full picture. It's a design choice. It's not.
It seems to be very interesting because the longer the times, the more condensed it becomes.
Yes.
So you can compare processes that happen on different time scales and put them one side by side and to see similarities and difference. Though they are, one of them can be on 1,000 years and one can be on 10 seconds.
Yes.
This is interesting, but does it mean that here we see some kind of punctuated evolution? So
yes, first of all, here it's one of the things that we see, the difference between this and between this. Sometimes this says that there is some kind of arbitration. When the line becomes so regular, then we know that there might be an arbitration on the document, which means it moves from something that is organic and jumping to something which is very regular. But there are, now I'm going to show, there are also, for example, here, this is the length of the article for 3-4 years, and then we can see, I know it because I know the story of it, there is 2 people that suddenly enter and begin to work between them, and there is a series of jump in the length. And once the jump is accepted, it becomes the norm for the length of the article. Which this, I think, it's very interesting. Which means, yes.
Sorry, in the jumps and tipping points, were they made by significance of events? by people interacting and reaching to a critical point, and then change of phase or change of steps to jump or tipping point? Or, I mean, my question probably that I formulated, is it natural because of the system reaching a critical mass, or is it because of something external happening and then people flowing forward? Not.
I think it's an excellent question to research, in the sense that I have a number of articles that were analyzed. I cannot answer it in a statistical fashion, but there are times in which there is a correlation, and there are times in which it's only a matter of suddenly a number of editors begin to synergetically work, and this is what brings the article to a new stage. There are, I will show you now, we were very interested to see and to show, because it was also a matter of creating awareness about this type of mechanism, that even in places where you have huge conflict, still the editing keep on going and jumping and growing, and it's actually growing in length and creating bifurcation to new articles, and all of the fights are not stopping the process. So the coming here, I brought a few. It's from the conflict Palestine-Israel, which we all know it's never.
I think it's a general thing that people tend to underestimate about Stigmergy. That is that even when there is conflict, the conflict tends to be localized to one part of the taste, and that does not stop the rest of the taste from developing. And so even if a particular part will be blocked because people are continuously undoing the one what the other does, the rest just continues. I mean, there will be aspects of the Palestine conflict that are uncontroversial, and those can just continue to be elaborated.
I think this is my this kind of pages was one of my first meeting with this kind of phenomena, and it's flabbergasting. It's like if you go and you look at the history and you read the comments, it makes no sense that something is coming out of it. But then you go to the article, and the article it's ultimately detailed and written, and yes, of course, in some of them at a certain point you have arbitration. But even the arbitration, it's extremely mild. Arbitration, it means one edit per editor per day. It's not that someone is going and coming and doing police. It's just reducing the amount of changes that each editor can do on this article per day. So it doesn't make the warring easy. It obstacles it, and that's all it takes to make it more organic in growth.
It allows space to think before response.
Before, yes.
It creates an artificial fiction so that things don't move too quickly. So
Yes,
it's
it's a
time for things to
slowdown.
stabilize.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is interesting point to study the fact of the length of articles. What's interesting in it, in this study? What's the role of studying the length in this phenomenon study? Can you explain it small, please?
I think
How we made the length, or if we studied the length?
Yeah, no, studying of the length. What's the most interesting in this? Because when I make a link with this theory and this example, I don't see clearly the role of the significance of the
length. Okay. Yes. If you remember before, I spoke about the fact that one mechanism of trace can be the current state of the solution.
Yeah.
So the length of the article, it's part of the current state of the solution.
From this side, okay.
No. It's I'm very because I'm running a bit, but. So yes, if it's not clear, please ask, because
I suppose there's a general trend for the length to increase, except like in this case where you create a new article to split it up.
Yes, this, and there are some articles that die. there is death among them.
Yeah, when they are supposed to be not relevant.
If they don't achieve a certain kind of a bulk beyond a number of years, they either die, dwindle.
Yes. Also, length in this sense can grow because more knowledge or facts are being added, or by repeating again and again the same.
But then you have editors. Everybody is editing, and there is a certain kind of standard. So yes, I can come in and I can repeat. So for example, we see a lot of places where there is like here, big piece of text is being added, but it doesn't stick. It's disappearing. It's an outlier. It means either the text was vandalism, or it was not relevant, or it's simply here, not necessarily it's vandalism, it's someone that wrote it the first time, it was reverted, and then after a lot of activity, it's going back to the length. And by the way, all of these white circles are action of vandalism, which it's amazing, because someone comes, cancels the whole thing, and immediately after, someone else is reversing it, which is... It's reverting, like taking it from memory and putting it back, which means it's blocking the vandalism. And to see it, I mean, I know, not for everybody, but for us it was very exciting in terms of having it tangible, seeing it, showing it.
But could it also be that the lengthier the article or the text, they can be translated into temporal changes. Like the lengthier they are, obviously the threshold, the timeline, which agents can collaborate with the system will increase. Therefore, you have kind of temporal attractive points, or from Stigmergy like this.
It's like the longer is the article and the more
like
places you can have of interaction.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Is it possible that part of this study can be explained by behavioral theories? Because, especially when we speak about the length, because from the behavioral theories we know all that normally we have more actions of editing than not cancelling. But we see also when with the trashes in the road, if you the first one who
throws the
paper,
garbage and then everybody
then you have thousands of
the broken window.
So there's no in behavioral theory. So maybe this part, the part of link is logic, even in the classical behavioral theories. The taxons have more to be on other things than the length. Because when we were looking at the beginning, the articles were short, and then one time it becomes length, it stays length.
Yes, apart from the places where it generates a different kind of article, but you have also here some kind of, you see, it started at this, and then there was an attempt to bring it longer and longer, and then suddenly it goes down. I think there is a lot of collaborative dynamics, which are, first of all, it's good to see them. Now, to exactly explain them, for me at the moment, it would be a bit pretentious. This is what was said before. It's possible to compare, and also here we see very well the organic turbulence, and here enters the arbitration. So it's very visible, and there is also some kind of symmetry between the two shapes, which tells us that probably all of them are under arbitration. But this is also another article that went out, and then anyway, there is always what to. Here it shows what I said before. The red dots are all the places that in the comments it's very clear that they are disputes. So they are back and forth, they do not agree in any fashion to the introduction or deletion of the text. And I think it's really interesting to see that, as I said before, in spite of the many disputes, there is much more than this. One need to enter to see the amount. Here it's a very...
How do you distinguish what is a dispute when you see that the same text comes back in and out?
We check it with the comments. We actually enter and check it. If I have this active, with a mouse, I do like this and I zoom in and I have the comment.
You check manually check the comment.
I manually check the text. It's not a statistical analytical tool. It's more a visualization of. So this was one project. This is a different project and it deals with the tangible world. So everything that has to do with Stigmergy and collaboration, I think there is really plenty of data. Now the question is how to bring it into the tangible, and if it's possible and if it's relevant. So here I did another graph that deals with the level of awareness, and what I mean here with awareness, it's an awareness between the individual and the community, the individual and the collective, and narrowcast and broadcast, it's from your article, and it speaks about the information, if it's being broadcasted locally or in a way that every agent connected to the medium actually perceive it immediately, almost instantaneously. Okay, so this is a switch that it's a tap. It's a switch that allows me to open an availability. I think that one of the really interesting things that can be said about switches in our material world today is that they speak about total autonomy. Which means if I go here and I press the switch, I have no awareness whatsoever in the medium that this is attached to some kind of resource, that it's finite, that the resource is being shared, that I am not the only one dealing with electricity. And this is a very interesting aspect of how the material world expresses the cultural emphasis and influence behavior. Because as long as I can open the tap and everything that happens is that water goes out as much as I want, I will not manage to have the kind of experience that belonged, for example, to the well. Not that we have to go back to wells, but one of the aspects of the well is that it's clearly common, that it's many people using it and there is some kind of interaction around it. So the level of awareness of a collective using the same kind of resource, it's very apparent. While in the modern switch, whether it is water or electricity or anything else, or the money from the bank, it's totally erased, completely. And it's erased by the way the medium is designed. This is design.
Excuse me, you think it might be better or maybe more, maybe better to say it's not erased but it's replaced, because obviously we didn't design this because we wanted to erase that. I think there are aesthetic sides as well, so
this has nothing to do with the fact that I am not aware to it. It's I don't think it's aesthetic. Maybe it was functional initially, but I think that it comes very well embedded within the cultural paradigm. I enter in my apartment, I want to experience autonomy. This is what I want to experience.
yeah,
And this is how I design it.
Erasing it, I don't think this is part of design. Like we don't design in order to erase.
Okay.
This exists, but it's not a matter of cultural design, because this is actually a kind of cybernetic device that allows you to reach a very large effect by investing very little energy at a certain point. And also many biological mechanisms physical mechanisms are working on the same principle. For example, a neuron gets certain signals that can be very weak, and suddenly, when a certain threshold is crossed, there is a firing which is uses a lot of biological energy which is accumulated in the cell itself and is ready, an action potential which is ready there for that occasion. So this is a very, very basic mechanism in the world around us.
You're speaking about the switching as a kind of amplification of a very small action that has a very big effect. But I'm thinking in terms of modularity. What she's trying to say, I think, is that these switches are individualized. These switches don't affect each other.
In any sense, exactly.
I have immediate control over the light. I don't care about what you think about whether they should like or not. You don't have another switch where you can switch it off. It's not like we have all switches and the system counts how many switches are on and decides on that basis how much light there should be. It's purely modular and because of that individual.
But it could be also linked to your previous slides that you were explaining. It could be a form of cognitive offload. Shifting one awareness from knowing that, well, okay, it's an interconnected world, the water is a finite resource, but at the same time, can I afford to hold this awareness all the time in my mind?
The problem is that at the moment you are trying to uphold this kind of awareness in a fashion which is ultimately more expensive. You are trying to do it by reading news about the fact that we have a problem of water, and by receiving a national report concerning water consumed, and by receiving a bill that going up in money tells how precious is the substance, and you don't get it on the one interface that is not cognitive loaded at all. If I will see it here, I don't have to read the paper, I don't have to read the national report, I have something which is part of the action.
So what you are suggesting is that the moment you push the switch, the reaction you get would depend on what all other people are doing with the electricity.
As this is
For example, if too many people are using electricity, your light will go on much weaker than if just you was using the electricity.
Not like this. This is problematic. But I'm going to show what we did. And of course, it's, again, design intervenes locally. It's not a universal solution. We did it for a case. So as I said before, in the broadcast, we get home consumption bills, and we get national consumption on the collective level. This is also an interesting cross that actually, when we pay, if we pay cash, it's clearly narrowcast, which means only I and the shopkeeper and my friend knows it. But the moment I pay credit, suddenly everybody has the data. Big difference. And it's the medium that does it, nothing else. Same if it is notes or it is digital notes. These are permanent, are accessible, are broadcast, encrypted data, These two, by now, we know they don't work, which means they made a lot of studies to see if this kind of raising awareness makes a difference. It doesn't. What does make a difference, because they made a few attempts, there are a few studies in Israel, if you go to the people, you speak with the people, and you tell them, you know, that on average you consume more water than your neighbor, this has a very strong effect. And on this basis, we started, basically, Moran Levy, the designer, started to think in terms of moving from an interface, as I said, totally autonomous. This is the air conditioning, to a Stigmergy medium that will allow self-organized coordination. This is what I want. So I have a community, I have availability, and I have some kind of medium, which here is a switch, and now I don't know what it is. And this. which is exactly the response to what was asked before. I do not want that this will become a way for the community to supervise the individual nor to monitor it, because then we are going to another nightmare. So here I'm going to open something. Happening. Okay, so of course at the moment it's virtual. So this was developed for a community. The case was a kibbutz of people that decided to go to live together, and they have solar panels to produce electricity. So they have a clear amount, and if they go beyond, they have to pay. And if they stay below, they actually gain because they are selling the electricity. And the idea was how to transform the switch. So at the moment, this is what I see. This is the switch. And I do not know who is who, but it's very clear to me how I coordinate.
So you see your own switch relative to the size of the other switches.
Yes.
You don't know who is who, but you know that you are either bigger or smaller than the others.
Yes. And we have a lot of them. I couldn't bring them here, but we have an installation of all of them. And when I move one, all the others adjust. Of course, at the moment it's digital, but I think it's one of the ways that design can really work with Stigmergy in terms of coordination. Of course, this works for a community, but it's a beginning. How am I with time?
It's 20 past, almost 20 past 3.
You have to
Okay. So we are definitely almost there. Okay. It's another very, very small project. Polymorphic traces is the possibility to create traces that are exactly one, but every different agent that see them can read them differently. So, for example, a zebra stripes in the street, if I have to cross, I will read it as the possibility to cross. If I have a car, I read it as the necessity to stop. So it's the same trace, but different agents read it differently according to their function in that moment. So this was a project, a very small project, was done with a school in Israel, in a small town. One of the problems of Israel is the sun. And when the children go out, Israel is relatively empty of shading, which is absurd, but this is the case. So the idea was how to help the municipality and everybody else involved to support the event of the children going on fit home. So what now happens is that the municipality, on the basis of its own ideas, decide the path and plant the trees and put someone to help them cross the road and makes it very fit and very safe. But the children go where it's shorter, inevitably. And here they don't have stripes, and they don't have any kind of shade, and they don't have... So it was a provocation, because at the moment we don't have the technical means to do this. But if the city would remember, which means if there was some kind of footprints instead of being on concrete, then the municipality would have a base upon which to perform decision making, which at the moment it's been arbitrary, between arbitrary and high level planning.
Yeah, usually those things happens on lawns, and then you can see where the grass is eroded, where you should put a path. But in Israel, I suppose you don't have lawns there, so you wouldn't see it.
No, this is all concrete, and also maybe it will change seasonally, because here it's hot, and there is called the idea of bringing back transient traces in the city would make a huge difference. It's about the safety. Now, of course, they do apps on the phone, but the app on the phone, it's another layer. I need to do all kinds of operations, and this is so immediate if we find how to do it without putting the children in the tent, which is not really a solution. Last.
Well, if you put a little bit of chalk in a regular spot so that they walk in the chalk.
Yes, so this is what they were working with, but anyway, it doesn't rain, so maybe...
Put a chip in one of them and just one of them.
Yes, but this you... No, but you don't need the chip for this. You have the smartphone. Everybody has a smartphone.
Yeah, but smartphone, you have to operate.
So you don't need to operate.
No.
Municipality can open and see the traces of GPS.
I can see where my daughter is if I want. I put an app there, and I actually never used it, but once she went in the night and she was 10 and I wanted to make sure nothing happens, and I just put an application and I could see on my phone where she is. And this is free, takes 5 minutes. She doesn't even know.
Now she knows.
She knew. No, she knew. She knew. But in principle, she doesn't need any kind of extra operation to actuate it. But then, the idea of the polymorphic, it's not valid. Because if I come with a car, I'm not like this to see if there is a child passing. Or if I have to plant a tree, maybe I can read statistically the data, but it becomes so much more. The last, this is a very interesting collaboration that just started half a year ago with a number of architects that work in Israel, Yara Rosner and Yodan Rofe. They are working on pattern languages, and they are working, which is from Christopher Alexander, and so we are not entering there, and they're working with semi-nomadic communities which exist in Israel in the Negev desert, the Bedouins, which it's another big conflictual area, because they are semi-nomadic and urbanization is growing, and of course urban planning is demanded, and resources and infrastructure, and nobody really knows how to make this transition in a fashion which will not erase this culture. So this is how it looks. The work that was done by Yara Rosner, which is very interesting, she was for a full, I think a couple of years, she was studying all the villages which look like this. So it's really difficult to see there any kind of order. They look like just, someone threw there a bit of broken things. But after a few years of studying it very systemically, she found very, very specific order patterns that are tightly bound to the structure of the land. And actually, it shows how their cultural order and internal laws are allowing flexibility through the land. So this is also interesting. So, for example, women are highly segregated. But when they are in this kind of environment, so they have a way to go out from the back, and they walk outside the street on the sand, and they follow each other's path, the footprints, and this is their kind of freedom, which is informal, because formally it is not allowed. But this is how they can go and visit sisters, and the problem is that the moment they are moved into a concrete community, then suddenly these women are not leaving the house. because everything is a formal script. To go out, they need to ask permission. They cannot follow each other's steps to know where to pass, not to break the face of the community. So for a lifetime, they will not leave the street or the house. So it's a totally different kind of reality, and suddenly you have these communities are breaking up, and there is a lot of violence and drug and poverty. And so, and this is something that I wanted actually to bring up and to ask, which is they give a very strong importance to the natural science. They also read the Stigmergy medium of where they put the houses and organize themselves accordingly, but the trigger is in the environment. And I don't know in terms of Stigmergy if it belongs or it doesn't belong, if it can be considered an initial trigger or it should be completely out of the equation. But there is this, I will call it a co-design of the environment, where the designing is definitely there because they are generating their space, but they are co-designing it with the land because the condition of survival are extremely tough. So all the patterns are organized according to water, which means there is no water, first of all, but there is some kind of lines. When the one time that it rains, the water breaks and goes to two different directions, and for a moment it streams. So this allows for the whole year to grow olives or to have cattle. That's all it's needed. And these are the lines that they use as a distinction between, separation between families. So this is an interesting case, and with this I am done. Not long ago we were discussing, starting to look for the possibility of Stigmergy within the way this semi-nomadic community organize themselves. Not for a purely observational, but to try and help the process of relocation in a fashion which is more coherent. I think I wrote it here. And the emphasis is how usually urban planning comes in. They relocate them, they design squares, and that's it. It's over. So she is working with a group of architects. She comes, they sit for a very long time with the tribe, and they ask them all the existing order. And then on the basis of the existing order, they try to produce a kind of plan within the same structure. So she brought this plan. And for a very long time, there was no agreement whatsoever, which means it created the fights between them, it created fights between them and her, and nobody could understand why, because all the rules of the culture were expressed and applied. And then we had this discussion, and we started to think in terms of Stigmergy, and what I suggested is that most probably there are certain kind of rules that are written in the medium. They will not articulate them as such, but they will apply them. And it came out that by doing very, very little, she's actually changing really little, but the difference is these lines of the water that now are respected, without explaining, without discussing. Suddenly the situation changed from a situation of conflict to a situation of total agreement, like this. And so I think it's a very interesting approach, case.
You mean both are designs for the city?
This is it's a tribe that at the moment is here. This is the tribe, these are the houses, and they need to relocate here because the territory is being redrawn in the desert by the state. So the idea was how to take this and to move it here. And this is not houses, this is allotments of land for families, where they can build up to 4 houses in
Which
the...
is, I suppose, inspired by the relief that you have seen that are more or less level.
Yeah. And the
So there's a lot of change between a situation of conflict or situation of agreement. Is it because of the state of solution is changed?
I think that it's because the state of the solution includes or embeds
Some elements.
the elements that are not really expressed in language, but they are fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How did you discover these elements that were not
It's not me, this is the architect
that's
Yara Rosner. She was doing field work for almost 2 years with them and extracting the patterns of construction from all the area of the villages, and she built a pattern language of this kind of semi-nomadic populations. We are now going to continue this work and try to bring it to a more elaborate.
The largest change is probably from being semi-nomadic to try to settle down. I mean, this is a clear plan.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because from the British, they are already not so nomadic. And the nomadism happens within the land. They don't cross borders, for example, between tribes, because then they have fights. So it's a semi-nomadic because most of the time it doesn't move.
Okay.
Though, of course, it's going to become settled point, and it's going to become concrete, and it's going to have infrastructure. And it's fundamental because at the moment, all of this is abusive, which means they cannot build anything that produces an economy because it's immediately being erased. This word now, when you remark it's coming. It's being destroyed because it's not legal. So they cannot build an economy. So, and they need to integrate it in some fashion. At the moment, it's a very... depends. It's a small one. That's okay. This is my last example.
Last comment, if I may, was that by the way, I'm tweeting about your presentation. It gets retweets, so people like it on social media. So
example. A life example of the emergency.
Life example of Stigmergy somehow. But when I was doing my PhD, I was very much focused on resilience and sustainability of complex systems. And this particular example is very interesting and relevant to my work because I remember there was a big study. I don't remember the place, but it was somewhere in a village in Africa. A group of people from Westerner, they tried to impose a structure on the natural tempo, if you like, or dynamics of the system. And that turned into strong history of violence and fight until the whole community collapsed, actually. And the analysis of scientists to see what happened exactly was that exactly what you mentioned here, that if an urban planner and architect goes and really include these people and really find out what are those key characteristics and properties that allow them to preserve their own identity, there is no violence. So they will create this smooth transition into a more complex whole.
Yes,
So,
what is important, which I didn't mention
and also
actually.
embedding the local intelligence that exists already in the system.
Yes, but it's not about, again, because maybe it was not clear enough, it's not about, again, someone coming from that side and reading it and doing it. It's about providing the community with the possibility to redo the process. Even if it's in a different, they need to reproduce the environment. If they will not be part in reproducing the environment will be useless. it will not be cohesive in the fashion in which the previous environment was. So again, it's not about finding a universal set of rules that then can be applied in serial. It's about how to create the opportunity for this type of community or other kinds of community to reproduce the environment. Because even when there is talking about situated cognition, embodied cognition, a lot of the time it's like, it feels more like a condition than an extension, because you are dependent from the environment and the environment is given to you. And I think here there is a slightly different perspective, because the environment, you are a big part in producing it. So you can reproduce it. It's not that if you are eradicated from your environment, there is no...
I think it's a very good idea also for disaster recovery, especially when, somewhere something happens and people think that the environment is destroyed, and then international aid groups go there and they try to rebuild it without really asking locals that what was the previous order. Can you tell us how we
It's
can
actually
reintroduce
even worse than this. There is a lot of exploitation of
Yes.
disasters. They come, they move the locals to a refugee camp, and they build the hotels. So, no, it's serious. It's what happened in Thailand. But yes, it's a very interesting line to try to apply it within disaster recovery beyond the emergency. It's a subsequent moment in time.
Well, the problem with Stigmergy, as always, is that you have these nonlinear processes where something small starts and then it tends to grow. So one way that a designer might help the process without interfering too much is by making a small start, like kind of a default pattern that is not at all fixed, and then let people vary it and adapt it to their own needs. But if you don't have anything to start with, then there is a risk that it's a little bit kind of too random and too chaotic. So a smart designer might have an idea like, let's start like that and kind of give some hints of where you might put your houses, but don't say people you should put your houses there and nowhere else. And then, if it's a good pattern, it will build the one on top of the other, like the ant hills and so on.
So do you still think less knowing, more design? Or
What I mean, it's not less knowing in the sense that designers don't know, yes, it's where we get to the fringe, to the edges of the paradigm. Before we launch theories or we break the paradigm, we still need to deal with the immediacy of the necessity of the problem. And these are the places where suddenly design, action, intervention become extremely relevant and alive. You can see all what happened in the spring revolution around Europe and all the initiatives and what is happening with social innovation, that there are no solutions and people are suddenly coming up. And the question is if this can have a kind of to serve as if pointing to the passage, to the jump into the next theoric frameworks. This is what I mean by the less we know, the more we design.
And
well, it's also the idea of the guided self-organization. So the designer should create a guidance, but then let the system self-organize. That's usually the way we use the term guided self-organization. There may be other ways to express the same idea.
It's becoming one of the really interesting lines of design. The ability to allow, but the problem is that when it's a design and it's attached to marketing, that suddenly it becomes customization. it's not about the self-organization of something new, it becomes a customization. And this is also part of recreating the language and recreating the thinking about, because after all, this is the world we produce and we live in, and it's a really fundamental aspect of how we perceive ourselves, how we interact with.
A few years ago, we had a seminar on Stigmergy prototyping, also for people working in design. And there the principle was that make something quick and dirty, let people interact with it, and then constantly change it instead of making one big blueprint. Do it much more temporarily and let the people interact with it. So that could be something in that style, like
We have a living laboratory also.
the living labs. Yeah.
Also, it can be in a way like if you look at like Apple products, it's obviously they found an optimal design template that is highly interactive with the social at large, so that there is this shape, and it's very it's not geometrical too much, so it's easy to create something like this rectangular. And a lot of people now trying to design for this rectangular block with different things from different brands. It's a form of, I think at certain points, in order to also like include waste of materials, because obviously when you design, you use materials as well, like linking it to the switch of the water tap. Like design could be a switch of water tap if you like, but what kind of thinking allows us to have at least an optimal by means of use of resources that maximizes a lot of interaction with the team?
If there is a way to create a coordination about it and not to apply a carpet solution, the solution, maybe it will keep. Also in this you have a lot of diversity, you have diverse contexts, you have diverse cases, you have diverse levels of urgency, emergency, and less relevancy. So to manage to find some kind of coordination could be really, really interesting also in this. So everything, it's also interesting to see that sustainability, though design was the first to enter sustainability, for real sustainability, it's a social problem. It's not a design problem. But it's amazing because it became an issue of design, why it should be social problem, policy problem, availability problem, scientific problem. So it arrived first to design, then it arrived to the climate change panel. Which is interesting. Again, it's the kind of play within these two different paradigm of interacting, engaging with the world, cognition, and I think there is quite a lot in the exchange.
I have two questions, a question and a remark. One question, do you know of any attempt to try to formalize this stigmergic approach to design and make it such that not every project requires it to do everything?
To do the wheel from scratch.
This is one. And so is there any...
As first of all, there is a lot of it in architecture. But most of it, it's computer-mediated human collaboration. So it's CADs, it's plans, it's sketches and plans which are computer-mediated. There is now a work which started a few years ago in Israel, in the Technion, Lola Benami. She is trying to use a Stigmergy to see if it can coordinate the physics side of building between the workers. Like not to have a Gantt, which always comes with, we all know what it comes, yes, and to create it as a tool of Stigmergy coordination. I don't know where it went. I saw the presentation of it 2 years
That's funny. I gave that example in my paper on Stigmergy as a building activity that could be coordinated Stigmergically. So
yes, I heard her presentation of the PhD. It was 2 years ago, like she was starting the research. And there was not long ago, again, in the computer there is a lot. In the tangible world, much less, because it's less flexible, data are less available. But this is also why I'm saying that we can use it, even if we cannot study within design to formalize it, at least we can use it as a paradigm to apply. And then if we apply it, then maybe we might have enough phenomenological cases to formalize it.
you should get in touch with these people that worked on Stigmergy by prototyping, and they work here in Belgium in Go West, an institute for design. I can send you the link.
Here in Brussels?
No, how West at West Flanders.
So
It's
near,
not very close to
near the Netherlands.
No, more close to northern of France.
So,
Second question.
it's not a question, just a remark that I think that today we are in the middle of two very exciting revolutions, technological revolutions that might make this approach of Stigmergy something which will explode. The first revolution is what we call today the Internet of Things, that actually makes it possible for the environment itself to become aware to a lot of signals, some of them geometrical, some of them actually there is a whole spectrum of sensors and as many kind of sensors that we can think of. There are going to be a rising awareness of the environment itself through these sensors, and this will provide innumerable amount of new environments, Stigmergic environments and mediums to apply these kind of ideas. This is the first. The first evolution is the Internet of Things, which is, and the second one is what is called virtual, not augmented reality, not virtual reality, augmented reality, which is really going in the coming 5 years, 5 to 10 years, it's going to be all over the place, which will produce interfaces that are very easy
To project on the real.
to project and visualize the environmental awareness and bring it into immediate and very intuitive, accessible knowledge of the medium. So these two, the conjunction of these two technologies will, I think, will create an explosion in this kind of using the medium and Stigmergic principles to...
You could, in principle, use augmented reality to project virtual places, markers onto your environment, and then a global brain-like system would accumulate, would aggregate the signals, so that people, for example, let's say simply a system that follows where people's eyes go. In a particular building or in a particular city, you might see that people's eyes usually move to there. And if you get accumulated from enough, you might see that these are the most interesting paths to look at. And that might tell you, for example, maybe these are not really the paths you want to see people, because maybe because of that they are not seeing the cars that on the road they are passing. So it's a kind of a way to collect virtual markers that belong to the environment, but you can't really put them on the real environment.
To see them in the medium, in the action.
Yeah. It's a whole layer of the idea or the theory of the global brain. It needs to address this kind of environmental medium-mediated kind of awareness. It will become, I believe,
it will embody
a substantial embodiment of the global brain. It will be fully distributed, and it will help to create a completely different way that we relate with the designed environment, what you call design environment. It will become even more designed, and in the sense that 10 years ago...
Well, not more designed, I mean more self-organizing, in the sense that designed things where that means there are plans that interact more with what really happens, and the one would influence the other. Like in the examples with the footsteps of the kids, where the design is that they should follow this route, while you see that in reality they follow this route, and therefore you adjust the route and start putting trees on the place where they actually walk, rather than the place where they're supposed to walk.
What I meant is that while being able to create new mediums, meaning design new mediums, you will allow much more self-organization happening through these mediums. So there is the design work and the self-organization are parallel. They will reinforce each other. The more design of mediums that you will have.
Well, we have to think about what is the ideal medium for Stigmergy self-organization. It should be a medium that is plastic in the sense that people's actions can leave traces, that has sufficient of a memory that those traces don't disappear too quickly, but that's also not too rigid, so that lots of things can happen in there that were not supposed to happen.
Well, there was actually, if you would please go back to your slides, you had this an extra space that you thought that it was emerging. So that could well be that space of algorithms and
Yes.
that space. Have to go
Yes.
Okay.
It was...
Very close to the beginning.
No, it was after this. It's the next one, yes.
This is already kind of an abstract way of depicting what's going on.
Yeah, the DNA traces is kind of a pretty empty quadrant.
Yes,
There should be lots of unintentional traces.
I'm sure.
Like the footprints of the kids left, that would be very useful to adjust things, and because they are transient, even to adjust them in real time.
Yes.
Do you think that big data could be one of those Stigmergy spaces?
At the moment, most of the big data is something that is being gathered by prints that are left in the digital media. For example, the webs that we go to, the action that we perform, they are statistically banked and they become...
But at the moment the approach is passive, that means that big data are mined from whatever data are available. If you create a medium in order to record certain types of data because you know that these data are useful for Stigmergy and self-organization, then you might get much better data.
Yes, much better data, and then maybe there is also much better deal with the individuals, with the agents. It's not happening in spite of them, it's happening with them.
There is one, you mentioned the footprints, but what is most important in urban environments is car prints. And you have the density of traffic now is measured and directed into every respectable navigation system. So your path in the city is already influenced by the level of density. It's a transient trace.
That was the original idea of Carlos's PhD, self-organizing traffic lights. It was indeed that it was the traces of the cars that were stopping at traffic lights that would drive the traffic lights.
Yes,
So
but also in you have today a GPS navigation system that already design your path from A to B according to traffic congestion. So, and at least in Tel Aviv it works wonderfully. No, wherever you have this, and this is the collective
you don't have
intelligence.
here Waze, W-A-Z-E.
Some people use it, I haven't yet.
The thing is that in the Waze application, it's also a social network. So whenever you see something of interest drivers see something of interest like police or a camera or an accident or an ambulance or something like this, they have a very simple interface. They broadcast the data, and the system just adjusts all the driving instructions accordingly. And if you have a city where a lot of people are using it, it becomes extremely intelligent. In Brussels, I don't know if many people are using it, so it's not very effective. But in Tel Aviv, almost everybody is using it. And sometimes in the United States, it was because it was bought by Google, so now it's in the United States it's spreading very fast. But it's nice when you drive and you are familiar with the city and you know that from A to B you go and this way, and suddenly this application gives you a completely different route, and you say, what the hell? This is small streets. I will be stuck there, but always. It's reliable to get you to the place the fastest at that moment. 1 hour later, it's completely different.
But this is very also interesting from the previous slide, please, that you showed that the system actually moves from this one, from market-based.
This one.
Yes, the green market-based on the top. On this quadrant. It's like at a specific time, Waze allows you to change your decision making based on actually moving the whole information available into a marker base, which would be probably more optimal, shortest path.
It's like until a certain point it's aggregating, and beyond a certain point it forks you on a different path.
Yeah. So it's a continuous, it's linked to what you mentioned, that instead of seeing reality as something that you observe and that's it, it's a way of allowing the agent and environment together recreate and co-create multiple realities that are only applicable to specific threshold of time, depending on the interaction.
Is that something you said in the beginning, that extended cognition is not just situated or embodied cognition, but that it is a cognition which not only is affected by the environment, but also affects the environment. And that's something we are now working on a paper. It's what we call radical non-dualism, the fact that the mind does not just extend out of the brain, but that the mind is in the whole environment, and that the brain is just part of this continuum. And these kind of Stigmergy systems are a nice example of it, because they are distributed intelligent systems, and each agent plays a little part, but the agents themselves are not the core of the thing. It's the whole coordinated self-organization that's happening.
And the relational coordinates that agents recreate and regenerate and lose as well, depending on different mediums that they tune into. So that's very much in line with this fine-tuning. You mentioned in the previous slides.
I think we still need to think deeply about what are the properties of the ideal environment or the ideal medium for the self-organizing Stigmergic communication. There are some obvious things you can say, but there are probably much more subtle and advanced things we could say to create an ideal medium.
And also one thing that I noticed while organizing all this, it's like that, for example, to do this, for me was very useful. Like not to look at one alone, because it's never one alone, but to realize that every combination provides me a different case study. Provides me a different case study. So here I made this kind of combination because they also brought me into the few examples that I brought, but I ensured there are different kind of combinations that points in different kind of phenomenology. And by all means, I think it's very potent.
That's something I have learned in my research, that is that by making good distinctions, by making good kind of dimensions to which you classify systems, it's sufficient to have a few distinctions. You can immediately make a whole bunch of combinations, and each combination normally means something specific. And if you just think about examples, you think about the obvious ones. But if you have this scheme, this taxonomy of all the possible combinations, then you can systematically look at all the combinations, and you will typically find examples that you have never thought of, because you have never associated them with Stigmergy or with whatever your problem is. And then you say, actually there should be something in that upper right quadrant. What could it be? Ah, yeah, actually yes, there is something there, and there are some more things that I could put there.
I think this research has a lot of application for refining the framework. There is no real framework, but the current attitude toward building smart cities. So what it means to be smart. How we can actually combine the intelligence that you get, the artificial intelligence that you get out of technological devices, at the same time the organic intelligence that you already have embedded in the system. So how can we bring them together through design? Like, I really like this idea of the switch, which is, I think, very smart, because yes, we just have a flat design of wall. It's not glass. We don't see even where are these cables if you don't have an imagination to imagine where they're coming from. Just switch it, and it immediately puts you, I mean, inadvertently, into a mindset that the resources aren't actually finite. There is an abundant source of electricity or water, and I can always have it. And it doesn't matter how much I use. My pattern of interaction with this doesn't matter. But where it comes to disasters, and when we, for instance, having an earthquake or something, that the water is not there or the electricity is gone, then we get angry that it's a problem of governments. They should have done something. But it's like not appreciating that in reality we are always in a state of finite resources, and we need to really rethink how we interact with our surroundings.
May I ask a question? A little bit on the other side, it was, let's say, theoretical. My question would be, you showed one case of, let's say, urban planning, very rudimental, etc. Now let's take a Chinese city, which is already established, 500,000, and we know that will grow. In 5 years, there will be probably 2 million easily. So, how could you apply Stigmergy in that kind of, let's say, city planning? Urban planning?
I think, first of all, it is a very, very relevant area to go to. There is a certain kind of observation. At the moment, I don't have the answer, but what I can say is that there are certain kind of observation concerning what is in the urban space as a media that works. So we are speaking, for example, about a certain level of connectedness, which means that in order for the city to work, I need to have this serendipity interaction. So if I have a city that does not have enough connectivity, then it will not provide this kind of advantage. So, for example, in Israel, and this is another work that I did with other architects, is that most of the construction is happening through constructors that are allotted some kind of very basic urban planning. But most of these places are then being fenced for legal reasons. And what happens is that these neighborhoods become non-walkable. You cannot walk them. And eventually they become very dysfunctional. because you do not have, actually, it's not only Israel, yes, you can find it at the periphery of Rome and the periphery of all big cities, and all the US is like this.
In Belgium, happily, that's still very. In Belgium, you can walk everywhere.
Yeah, it's periphery usually. It's like the big buildings that and this is the place where you have eventually crime, where you have violence, where you have all kinds of events, and that in a city which is well connected, it's under the threshold. So because you have constant presence and flow and interaction. So this is one thing, which means to study the medium in the urban fabric as a stigmergic, and to understand what are the characteristics that can be extended as property of the urban space. This could be one way. And then there is the other way, which is the design action way. You find local places with issues, and you intervene locally, and you monitor it, and you see, and you evaluate, and you build cases.
But in the case of the Chinese city, that probably wouldn't work because the city
no.
isn't there for long enough to know what.
That's exactly my point. Is in cultural, circumstances, local cultural circumstances.
Yeah, surely it's
there
not
will
the
no
same.
one will ask someone, would you like, or do you think, there are city planners. They go and establish to go, and the people just move in. I don't think there is a particular social fabric among those newcomers coming in. They only feel probably traffic. The largest congestion happened to be in China for 9 days. The cars were blocked. 9 days, motorway, 6 or 8 tracks in one way, 8 tracks another way. So 9 days they were blocked. Things like that. And then obviously the whole infrastructure, school, kindergarten, this and that, to have the let's say, family or individual life in the hands in order to be able to work. They may work on that level, but I'm not sure they will ask someone. So that's a stigmergy might, intuitively speaking, might give them a kind of, let us say, tool in order to do this a little bit better. But
it will take a moment to make a tool for urban planning, I think, but it could be definitely a relevant direction to explore.
Yes,
And,
I was actually thinking.
No doubt about this. I was just asking, which
it's
fields, how would you apply that?
It's very well known that the problem is huge. Specifically in China, they have what they call today ghost cities, which mean they took cities, they built them from scratch, kind of overnight. They made them super luxurious and expensive, and nobody wants to live there. And they have a very high number of these creatures. The ghost cities of China. It's really a phenomenon.
I think another way to answer your question is that if you please go back to the slides of Stigmergy as a framework has different elements. There is an agent, there is an environment, and there is an action.
This?
Yes. Trace, action, agent. I think you can play with all of these in different ways, depending on your place and your environment. How flexible it is in relationship to modifying the agent interaction. Can you reproduce a different or redefine the action through which those agents can coordinate their actions? Or is it a way to create a different trace that allows agents to coordinate themselves differently? So I think it's a way of not seeing just Stigmergy, but Stigmergy has multiple dimensions, each of which you can design and modify in order to create hopefully a global solution or coordinated pattern that helps the system to achieve what is unique to that system. So obviously, what works in China doesn't work in Israel and vice versa.
But in a million of agents living in one city, just imagine how many traces there would be. Even if you narrow them to some typical things. I mean, it's probably impossible to monitor traces or to work on that.
It depends,
I would
because
say
you
that the
have
more
millions of
agents, the
ants.
easier it is to
Yeah.
have traces.
But not all traces
If you
also-
look at social colonies, you have
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
But
And
still,
they-
they are much more simple than cities.
But the traces, they read it because the trace is being read locally, and the more agent, the more accurate. So,
There seems to be one principle that I'm thinking about is the relation between localization and centralization. So certain aspects of the design must remain local in order to minimize this movement and to make it more efficient. But certain other aspects must be coordinated globally. And this borderline between locality and globality needs to be dynamic or at least changeable in order to answer different dynamics which you cannot predict in advance. So just intuitively I would go and start to, if the city itself is a medium, multi-layered or multi-dimensional Stigmergy medium, I would start to think in terms of local coordination, global coordination, and how to shift the borderline between them as a kind of an approach. Then needs, of course, research and some deeper thinking how to make sense of it in a more detailed level. But I was thinking that this highway that was blocked for 9 days, it was 16 lanes, and it's inevitable that if you have a 16-lane highway and something goes wrong, it will be a disaster. While if you have two-lane road and something goes wrong, you have a few other ways to circumvent this. So
I think it was a design problem because they had a bottleneck somewhere down the road. It was 16 lane and then it was reduced to like 5 or something like this.
I just heard about the problem.
I saw the picture. There is a video on YouTube.
I saw the picture as well, but
What
I
did
didn't
you-
go
Yeah.
into the details.
Yeah, little question. Between your lecture, I was thinking about some demographic problems of Brussels. Because it's now not more than 10 years that I live in Brussels, and I read so much about some urban concepts and some propositions from urban architecture, some things that comes from Brussels, from this university, because it's the University of Brussels. But I never heard something that really are convincing. But when I was listening to this presentation, I was thinking about. I believe really because there are some projects that I don't believe. I don't know if it will be successful now in Brussels. Some projects have to change, the social face of it. Can call it like this. But I don't believe. I don't know what would be the consequences. When I had some points about this from some concepts of Stigmergy, is that I believe in the influence that you can have when you communicate with when you create a local pattern, and this local pattern will communicate with all the local elements, and will create some patterns that will create some a kind of called a changing that will always create a new will mark a new state. This new state will always be a new kind of a new state of solution. It's changing. So when you look to Brussels, and was one thing is some elements of from design. It can be influence also the reality of the urban structure. It has a good link with some demographic and social problems of a city. I was inspired with from one time I listened to a Moroccan European architect and historian. It was a presentation about the old concepts about the urban shifting of the old city face in Morocco. You know, the city face of Morocco. And what's one interesting point, who a design can be design of the European architecture is it represents some points of the culture, values of the citizens of Fez, namely that in the old city of Fez, or the center of Fez, all the streets are the same, all the houses, the extent of the houses are the same. And what does it reflect? That you can't see a difference between the house of a rich or house of a poor.
Mm.
And it has some cultural value. Namely, a rich it's not accepted that a rich always showed he's rich.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not accepted that the poor also always showed he's poor, so that they always ask for rich. So when he's walking the street, okay, there's some difference in clothes, but it not has to express it many. These are old values of Fez.
Mm-hmm.
Also in Moroccan, when they spoke about Fez, for them they are peace of people. So it's what I mean is this: there's some values that are linked with some design aspects of Fez. Mm-hmm. So, and this create one. Maybe this can be a little solution for the tension that has been between the demographic tension between poor and rich in cities like Brussels. It's one problem in Brussels. Because you can have a problem, the classical problem of ghettos, like in Paris, where you have the Paris and then you have districts. But Brussels, some things peaceful, small in size, and good educated. And they are not from point for space in distance. You can't. They are not go great distances between poor or rich quarters in Brussels. But the differences are visible and can sense it. And the tensions exist. So maybe one solution to the tension to the problem of this tension can be a design aspect, namely with also real social and economic aspects. You don't have you understand the design aspects are not a magical tool, but it can be sometimes it can take some inspirations that can help us to combine different solution factors.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
This might be true when you address, it might be true for the future planning. But you know, seeing Brussels, it's already state of the art. You cannot do anything much, you know. We have 3-4 areas which are rather poor. You see from the housing, etc.
Yeah.
Why it came? Because there were old houses, they were cheap. The people who moved in with low income, they bought them, and then that's how it comes, you know. On the other hand, I mean, Israelis in the medieval age were the same, you know. They were culturally excluded, so they put the ghetto because they supported each other. But you know, it was really, you know, I know, for example, the city of Graz in Austria, where was really the laws were, you know, really anti-Israelis, as Israeli, and it was major in that time, in medieval time, across the Europe. So those kind of cultural perceptions are difficult to how can I say, eliminate. But you're right. For the new one, particularly, if the city council builds something, and obviously rents those houses, that might be for the future. But for Brussels, it's already too